April 11th, 1968, 11:06 a.m., Harlem, outside a packed church. Nicky Barnes watched Bumpy Johnson's casket arrive, and he understood trouble was scheduled today again. He stepped from a black Cadillac Fleetwood with his wife beside him. But a second woman appeared behind reporters, wearing mourning like perfume for cameras. Her dress was short, sharp, and wrong for a funeral, and every detective on 125th Street lifted his eyes when she smiled at Nicky first. If Nicky erupted, he'd look weak. If he swallowed it, he'd look owned. But he did neither, and that scared people in that crowd most. Bumpy's death had left Harlem's map blank, and Nicky came to fill it, not with grief, but with calm, public control before anyone else did. His wife, Gloria, wore a dark coat and a hat pinned like a weapon, and she held his arm as if holding him together tight. The other woman slipped through the crowd with wet cheeks and dry eyes, a practiced sob catching attention the way a siren does every time. Two photographers from the Daily News pivoted toward her, and Nicky clocked the flashbulbs, because photographs outlived funerals and alibis on these streets forever too. A plainclothes detective named O'Malley stood near the steps, hand inside his coat, watching Barnes's face more than the casket for one bad move only. Nicky recognized O'Malley from a raid on Lenox Avenue, and he recognized the hungry look that said, "Today we finally get you in public here." Inside the church, the air felt thick with cologne, lilies, and caution, and every pew carried a ledger of favors owed by someone present now. Bumpy's people sat close to the front, stiff as statues, while new crews hovered near the back, measuring distance to the exits in case things. Nicky's lieutenant, a short man called Junior, leaned in and whispered, "That girl came with company, and it isn't yours at all today, boss, either." Nicky didn't turn his head. He only shifted his gaze, catching the mistress's escort, a clean-suited stranger with police shoes and cheap cologne mixed wrong. Gloria saw it too, and her fingers tightened around Nicky's forearm, nails pressing through wool, a private question with no words, yet still burning hot. Nicky answered with stillness, the way he answered everything, because stillness was his brand, and Harlem respected brands more than vows on days like this. When the pastor began the eulogy, the mistress dabbed her eyes too theatrically, and a few men exchanged smiles that weren't friendly toward Barnes alone. Those smiles were messages. You can buy heroin routes, but can you buy your own household in front of cameras and cops right now, Nicky? A rival dealer from Sugar Hill, known as Mouse, slid into the pew behind Nicky and murmured, "Hell of a family reunion for a king." Nicky didn't look back. He said, "Keep your voice down, Mouse, because grief makes people careless, and careless people get remembered by the wrong men." Mouse chuckled under his breath, and Nicky filed it away, because laughter at a funeral was a marker for future disrespect in Harlem's new order. Outside, squad cars lined the curb, and a TV van parked near 126th, antenna up like a spear aimed at reputations of men inside today. Nicky leaned toward Junior and whispered, "Move our car to the west corner, plate covered, driver ready, and tell Slim to watch O'Malley all day." Junior nodded and slipped away, and that small movement reminded Gloria that Nicky was working, not mourning, which made her angrier than the dress ever. The mistress turned at the aisle and let her gaze land on Gloria, then on Nicky, as if assigning roles in her play for everyone. Gloria's jaw set, but she stayed seated because she knew the room, and she knew how predators waited for scenes to start fast here today. Nicky felt that same predator patience from the cops, who were not grieving, only collecting, and he kept his face blank like paper under ink. At 11:33, as the choir rose, the mistress began to cry louder, shoulders shaking, but her eyes kept scanning for lenses near the front row. That detail told Nicky everything. Somebody had promised her safety if she performed, and safety in Harlem always came with strings tied to other hands. A woman from Bumpy's family leaned over and whispered to Gloria, "Don't do it here, baby. Not in God's house with police watching close too." Gloria nodded without looking, but her breathing changed, shallow and fast, like a runner waiting for the gun to fire at the finish line soon. Nicky leaned in and said softly, "Hold it, Glow. Just hold it." And his tone was command, not comfort in this room right now, please. Gloria finally looked at him, and the look carried a ledger of nights, lies, and humiliations he'd never apologized for since they first married young. Nicky met her eyes and didn't blink because blinking was surrender, and today's surrender could cost him Harlem's next decade in one stupid moment alone. At noon, the service ended, and men rose like a tide, coats brushing, whispers rising, as the pallbearers prepared the casket for the front steps. The moment the casket appeared, the mistress let out a cry that cut through the room, and several heads snapped like gunshots from every corner. She pushed forward, elbows out, saying, "Bumpy, baby, no," as if she'd earned the right to the name on wood with one loud show only. Gloria stood so fast her chair scraped, and the scrape turned every detective's head, because that sound meant uncontrolled emotion in a controlled crowd today. She grabbed the mistress by the hair at the back of her head and yanked, hard, dragging theater off the stage in front of everybody. The mistress squealed, half pain, half performance, hands clawing at Gloria's wrist, and the crowd broke into a ring of air around them instantly without. Nicky moved one step, then stopped because stepping in meant choosing a woman, and choosing in public meant losing control over his own story today. O'Malley smiled like he'd been waiting for this headline, and a camera clicked 3 times, fast, greedy, unforgiving at the worst possible angle too now. Mouse whispered to his man, "That's Barnes bleeding in daylight," and Nicky heard it, because insults travel in silence first before they hit loud later. Gloria dragged the mistress 2 feet from the casket and hissed, "Don't you touch him. Don't you dare. Not today in my face again, ever." The mistress tried to smile through tears and said, "He loved me too," as if love was a badge she could flash to own space. That sentence was gasoline, because it wasn't aimed at Gloria alone. It was aimed at Nicky's image, and everyone knew it, even the quiet ushers. Nicky finally spoke, voice low, and the room bent toward it. "Gloria, let her go," and he meant it like law and not like a plea. Gloria didn't release. She looked at him with betrayal sharpened into steel, and the moment threatened to split his empire right down the middle publicly. Nicky understood the midpoint truth then. The scandal wasn't accidental. It was bait, designed to make him punish his own wife under those cameras today. If he humiliated Gloria, rivals would see a ruthless king. If he defended her, cops would see a motive, and either way, he lost something. So he chose a third path, the one he always chose, a path made of logistics, timing, and other people's mistakes caught on record later. He nodded to Junior near the door, and Junior lifted 2 fingers, meaning the car was moved and the west corner was clear for exit. Then Nicky leaned toward O'Malley, close enough to be heard, and said, "You watching a hair fight while your real problem walks out back doors." O'Malley's eyes narrowed, and for a second his confidence slipped because cops hated being told they were missing the angle by someone they wanted caged. Nicky raised his voice just enough to reach the pews. Somebody brought cameras to a funeral, and somebody opened this door for them on purpose. The room shifted because now the scene wasn't about 2 women. It was about who engineered humiliation, and Harlem hated puppeteers in their own church. The mistress froze for half a beat, and that half beat told Gloria she'd been coached, like an actress forgetting her next line under lights. Gloria released her hair abruptly, not from mercy, but from strategy, and the mistress stumbled forward, suddenly without a script to hold her upright now. Nicky stepped between them, palms out, not touching either, and said, "This is Bumpy's day, and we will respect it or leave right now, quietly." His men moved like curtains, forming a corridor that looked polite but felt final. And suddenly Gloria had protection without being coddled by his words. Mouse tried to laugh again, but he caught Pastor's stare from the back, and the laugh died because Pastor didn't play comedy at funerals either. Pastor was Bumpy's old enforcer, and his loyalty was the real prize today, because whoever earned it inherited fear by proxy across all blocks tonight. Nicky caught Pastor's eye and gave a slight nod, a silent promise of order, and Pastor answered with a barely visible nod back for now. That was the brief relief, the inhale after the choke, and the crowd began to move outside as the casket cleared the doors into sunlight. Then pressure returned, harder because the sidewalk was a stage with police barriers, microphones, and impatient rivals waiting for spillover from inside this moment, too. A reporter shoved a mic toward Gloria and asked, "Are you family, ma'am?" And Gloria's eyes flashed because the question was poison served cold publicly. Before she could answer, the mistress lunged again toward the casket, crying loud, and a cop stepped in, creating the perfect photograph for tomorrow's papers. Gloria's restraint snapped a second time, and she grabbed the mistress's shoulder, not hair, pulling her back with a jerk of disgust, this time clean. O'Malley raised his hand, ready to order cuffs, and Nicky saw it. The larger trap was an arrest justified by chaos and headlines afterward, too. Nicky stepped forward and said, "Officer, you arrest my wife at a funeral. You make yourself the story, and your bosses hate stories like that." O'Malley hesitated, because he did, and that hesitation gave Junior time to slide a folded envelope into the reporter's hand with a phone number inside. The envelope wasn't money. It was a tip pointing at Mouse's crew, and the reporter's eyes widened because a new villain sells better than jealousy. Mouse noticed the exchange and stiffened, realizing the spotlight had shifted from Barnes's marriage to Mouse's business, and that was worse for him right now. The mistress, sensing she'd lost the audience, tried to scream Nicky's name, but Pastor's hand clamped her elbow, stopping her cold without a single word. Pastor leaned close and said, "Not here, not now," and the threat in his whisper was heavier than any shouted curse on that whole block. Gloria saw Pastor restrain the woman and understood, finally, that this wasn't just infidelity. It was politics disguised as heartbreak in broad daylight outside church. Nicky leaned toward Gloria and said, "Get in the car, west corner, no talking," and Gloria obeyed because the command sounded like safety finally offered. As his crew moved them, a young cop tried to block Nicky's path, but Slim stepped in, smiling, showing credentials that weren't real at all. The cop faltered, confused, and that second of confusion was Nicky's predatory finish, because he slipped past without ever touching a badge or raising hands. Gloria climbed into the Cadillac, eyes wet now for real, and Nicky slid beside her, staring forward as microphones shouted behind glass at their window. Junior slammed the door, and the driver eased out slow, not fleeing, because running looks guilty, and Nicky never looked guilty unless he planned to. Behind them, Mouse was suddenly surrounded by questions, and O'Malley's attention drifted, chasing the new thread Junior had planted into the press pack today, too. That was the twist. The women's fight was real, but it was also bait, and Nicky used the bait to hook someone else in return. In the car, Gloria finally said, "She came to humiliate me." And Nicky answered, "She came to humiliate us for money or protection from somebody." Gloria's voice shook. "Is it true, Nicky?" And he didn't deny it, because denial is weakness when everyone already knows the shape of truth anyway. He said, "We talk at home," and that home sounded far away because Harlem was changing and even marriage had surveillance now from every angle. Gloria stared at her ring like it belonged to someone else, then whispered, "You used me as your shield," and Nicky said nothing this time. Silence was his price, but it was also his punishment, because the cost of staying king was letting love become collateral in front of strangers. Back at the church, the mistress was questioned by cops, and Pastor kept her close, not to protect her, but to control damage for Harlem. Later, a small item ran in the evening paper, "Barnes' funeral scuffle," and those 3 words were a knife, not a joke to his brand. But another story spread faster, whispered in barbershops and backrooms. Barnes turned a trap into a hunt, and Mouse got burned without a shot. O'Malley filed his notes and realized he'd lost the clean arrest he wanted because Barnes never gave him the correct target twice on the same. Nicky gained Pastor's quiet respect, yet he went home to a colder house, where Gloria slept facing the wall like a verdict against him forever. The mistress called his number once that night, but Junior answered and said, "It's over," and hung up before she could beg or threaten back. In Harlem, the next king wasn't chosen by romance or rage. He was chosen by who stayed calm while the whole city baited him daily. Bumpy's funeral ended at 12:42 p.m., but the war it revealed lasted years, and it began with a dress and a grab outside that church. Gloria never forgot the cameras, and Nicky never forgot the way her hand shook when she let go, because that shake was real love-breaking. He could control streets, routes, and men, but he couldn't control consequences, and the funeral taught him that in public under bright Harlem sun too. Years later, when people recalled the day Bumpy was buried, they remembered the scuffle, but the killers remembered the lesson: control the story or die. Because in that one moment, Nicky Barnes proved the coldest truth of Harlem. The man who exits clean owns tomorrow, not yesterday, and pays privately.